Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of LA Guitar Hang. And tonight I have a special guest named Michael Ross. Michael is the creator of the website Guitar Moderne. And he's also a longtime music journalist who's been published in many magazines. And he's written several books. And he's also a guitar player himself. So welcome to the show, Michael.
Great to be here, Dwayne. Good to meet you.
Yeah, good to meet you too, man. We were just talking a moment ago. Uh, I was referred to Michael by my friend Val Lupescu, who I grew up with. And Val and I were high school friends. I'll get into that in a moment. But he had mentioned to me, oh, you got to meet this guy, Michael, a friend of mine. He's a great guy. And he told me about your website, Guitar Moderne. And I started looking it up, and I see that you have a channel on YouTube and you have a ton of great interviews with some of the greatest guitar players of all time, like Bill Frisell and John McLaughlin and all these guys. So I started watching a couple of the interviews and I loved them. I thought it was really well done and I loved how you did it. And so it's a pleasure to have you on the show, man.
Oh, thanks, Dwayne. Yeah, I the YouTube thing is relatively recent. I started the site about 10 years ago,
Mm,
or maybe over 10 years ago. Because I was writing for the guitar magazines, but I was finding so many of these cool avant-garde, for want of a better word, or guitarists that are pushing the envelope,
mm,
and they were nice enough at Guitar Player and Premiere to allow me to write about some of them, but they have to cover the whole waterfront in their magazine. So they have to cover the blues guys, the country guys, the pop guys. So they had limited space for the more avant players. So maybe I'd get one every 2-3 months or something
mm.
like that. And I was just finding so many of them, just obsessing over YouTube and going down rabbit holes and stuff like that, and new ones and young people. I didn't even think I'd be getting, famous people for it, but there were so many unknown people that I thought people should know about. And I thought about posting it on Facebook. But even though I have a lot of guitar player friends on Facebook, only a small fraction of them would be into this particular kind of guitar playing. So I thought, well, why don't I make a website? And here, 10 years later,
Yeah.
or over 10 years later, it's been up and running. And it was just, I guess, like everyone else during COVID, that well, maybe it's a little more. I'm not even sure I started it before COVID, the YouTube stuff, and I realized I can record these because everybody got into Zoom. So I realized I could record these on Zoom and post them on YouTube, and then post, and embed them in the site. And maybe the YouTube would drive traffic to the site, which it has.
Mhm.
But it also saved me a lot of transcribing. I didn't have to either pay to have it transcribed or transcribe the interview. And people during, I guess, COVID had time to sit down and watch it. It's a lot faster to read an interview than it is to
Right.
watch one. But people seem to enjoy watching it, and the channel has grown, and in the last couple of years, the magazine has grown. So it all worked out, and of course, they're fun to do. I mean, I think I started with Bill Frisell, might have been the first, because I know Bill for, God, 30 some odd years now. And
Oh, okay.
so I figured he'd be willing to do it. But more and more people were willing to do it because, once again, because of COVID, they're not on the road. I mean, I never thought I could get John McLaughlin to
I
do
know.
an interview, but he had a new record out. He wasn't going to be touring to promote it. He wasn't going to be going around to press people. I mean, I'm sure he was doing a certain amount of press, and I know he's done a certain amount of interviews, but somehow he ended up doing it.
Was Guitar Moderne always a website or was it also a magazine as well?
No, it was never a magazine. I mean, actually, I started it, interestingly enough, right about the time I got laid off from Guitar One. I was the gear editor at Guitar One magazine. And
Okay.
I kind of saw the writing on the wall. I mean, magazines were migrating to the web anyway. And, all the magazine stores, I was living in New York at the time, and I used to love the Union News magazine stores, go in there and, stock up on all guitar magazines, and at the time I was also getting into computer music, so getting into future music and computer music, and I would just love picking up all these magazines. And then one by one, I watched them close.
Mhm.
There just weren't any more magazine stores, so it was going to mostly subscription. And even then, I could just see they were having to cut back, and I just figured the future is online. So rather than trying to write for an online magazine, which, most of which paid terribly, if not at all. I mean, if at all, I thought, well, maybe I could get online. And it took a couple of years, but I've got some advertisers now, or sponsors, as my wife says I should call them, because they've been great. Red Panda, great pedal company,
Mhm.
and Earthquaker's been with me. They were the first, one of the first, and they've been with me for 3 years, 4 years now. And Red Panda and Source Audio just came on board, and so essentially, I am getting paid to do this stuff, but it's my own thing, and yeah, no, there's no way I would get into a paper magazine at this point.
Yeah, it really seems like the paper things are going away. I mean, as a kid, I probably, because Val had told me that you had written a lot of articles for Guitar Player and pretty much all the guitar magazines. And I grew up having subscriptions to Guitar Player, for years and years and years. I would always look forward to that new magazine that would come in, and you read about guitar players you've never heard of and read about gear. And I myself, I just faded away from buying Guitar Player, and the other, every once in a while I'll buy a magazine just for the hell of it. But the internet, as you said, has is totally taken over, and podcasts are just amazing. You can talk to someone for 2 hours, and it's kind of better than any interview you're ever going to read, because it just goes so much more depth, and you get to hear the person talking, and you get to see them sometimes. So it's a cool thing for sure, and that's why I started mine. Same thing with COVID. It was like I missed the camaraderie of performing live and hanging out with my musician brothers. So I started doing this, and mine's very small. It's just kind of chugging along. And you had mentioned earlier that you were trying to showcase players that weren't necessarily known that well. And that's exactly what I was trying to do here. At first, just focusing on the guitar players in Los Angeles that the mainstream world may not know about. But now I'm also, bringing on people like yourself or people from other cities, just because I'm at this point, I'm just going to bring in whoever is I like and whoever's willing to talk to me. And if they, they're probably going to be of interest to other people as well anyway. But yeah, it seems like it's going in that direction, the podcast.
Definitely going to podcasts. I mean, some of the real major publishers. I mean, at the risk of biting the hand that feeds me, I am
Yeah,
still writing for Guitar Player. I'm just finishing up 3 interviews for them,
cool.
and I've still done stuff for Premier Guitar, and they're great magazines. And for guitar porn, as we used to call it, like looking at pictures of cool guitars,
Yeah,
it's not the same looking on a screen. It's nice to
I
have that
know.
magazine in your hands.
Yeah.
But the great thing about podcasts is, oh, I should also say about the magazines, is the people that work for those magazines. First of all, they can write,
Mhm.
and if the if the writers can't write, the editors can edit it into well written pieces. Which my experience is a lot of online writing is really terrible, because as Confucius say, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, and since it doesn't pay anything, people who actually write for a living don't want to write for it. But so the magazines still have that going for them. And but yeah, as you say, podcasts are becoming huge. For one thing, you can listen to a podcast while you're working out. You can't really, or running or walking in the park, you can't read a magazine while you're doing that. And as far as gear reviews go, I mean, you can see the new thing now with gear, obviously, with the, certainly with the bigger manufacturers and even some of the smaller ones. As soon as something new comes out, all the video vlogger reviewers have it already and have a video
Mhm.
ready to drop on the day the company releases it. So you find out, you're interested in a new product, you can see 12 guys demonstrating it, with varying degrees of competency. But, there's the, two or three guys that are always great. RJ Ronquillo, who's a
Mhm.
I think he pronounces it wrong, kilo actually.
Mhm.
But I mean, he play. If you just want to hear somebody play something and what it sounds like in the hands of somebody who can play, he's great. You watch. Oh, I can't remember. I can't remember all their names, but there's two or three other people that you can rely on that they're going. Well, obviously Andy from Reverb now,
Mhm.
or he used to be from that guitar shop out in Portland. He's a great player and he's, great at demoing stuff. And so I mean, there's another function of the magazines that's kind of been taken over by the thing. And, so yeah, for you to get into it at this point, I mean, it takes time, it builds slowly, but
Mhm.
if you're doing something good, people have the time and they're looking for it. So it
Yeah.
should take off.
Yeah, for me on my channel, like the gear reviews by far get the best hits. You know, the interviews do too, but yeah, it's amazing. A gear review, you'll get thousands of people seeing it and you're just like, wow, it's amazing.
Oh yeah, I mean all the same stuff that that operated in the paper world operates in the virtual world. I mean, I remember when the magazines realized that if they put gear on the cover, which a lot of editors fought for a long time, but they sold better than putting artists on the cover. I mean, it's kind of almost a sad commentary that the guitar world has become this gear-oriented world rather than a music-oriented world.
Right.
But it's a fact of life, just like it's a fact of life that if I post an interview with John McLaughlin, Andy Summers, or Bill Frisell, I'm going to get thousands of views. Whereas if I do, an interview with Tim Motzer, who's a great player and has done great stuff, it's not going to get as many views. It's
Right.
just, and the site traffic is going to go up the week that I have the John McLaughlin, interview up or the Andy Summers interview up. And so they're just like in the magazine world, when they used to twice a year they'd put Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix on the
Yeah.
cover because it's sold. I mean
Yeah.
those issues flew off the stands. People just can't get enough of it. So it's a fact of life. But as with the guitar magazines, it's funny you mentioned reading Guitar Player to read about players you hadn't heard of. When I got my first gig writing features, I was doing reviews for them. But when I got my first gig, I was pitching a feature to them. I pitched Raoul Bjorkenheim and Jimmy Suman. I don't know if you know either of those guys. They're both
No.
Finnish guitar players. And I went in to talk to the editors, and they said, "Well, why should we do something on them? Nobody knows who they are." And I said, "That's why I read Guitar Player. That's why a lot of people read Guitar Player. We don't need Guitar Player to tell us who Jimi Hendrix is. We know who Jimi Hendrix is."
Right.
And in fairness to Guitar Player and Premier Guitar, they do a mix of people that you've heard of and people you haven't heard of. So the people that you've heard of draw in draw people in, the people you have heard of draw people in to find out about the people you haven't heard of,
Right.
which is, that's fine if that's the way it works. That's great.
Yeah. Now, are you based in Nashville right now?
Yeah, I am.
How long
I've
have you been there for?
been here 9 years.
And then were you in New York before that? Like where did you grow up and how did this whole guitar thing get started in the beginning?
Well, I grew up in New York,
Okay.
and I mean, the guitar thing got started, I guess, in high school. I went to high school in the '60s, and the Beatles hit. I played violin before that and played tuba. I marched in the marching band, at the high school with Steve Tyler was playing drums in that band.
Wow.
So and he had bands around, that I used to see, and I started with folk music though. My guitar playing started. I came up with more of that kind of stuff, folk and blues. And then when the Beatles hit, I went electric and a bit, and then went off to college for a little while. I didn't study music, and then dropped out, and then started playing music and touring around with a show band on the East Coast. Doing
Mhm.
hotels. That was my Berkeley. We had to play everything from Autumn Leaves to Smoke on the Water,
Yeah.
at a low volume, though. Smoke on the Water, low volume. So I had to get my first distortion pedal so I could play Smoke on the Water at low volume.
Nice.
And then and then I played around New York for a while. And then I got married and we moved to San Francisco and I was out there for 12 years. And I played out there for a while, and that's where well, actually, I guess when I was back in New York is when I played with Eric Anderson for a while. He was a folk singer from the 60s. It was
Mm.
kind of a dream. I'd grown up listening to him and, got the gig and we went to Norway and toured a little bit around the East Coast. And then I moved out to San Francisco and was playing country out there every weekend for 10 years. And then while playing with original bands, rehearsing and playing gigs during the week with different original bands. And, we played some nice gigs. It was a great music scene. I met some great people. And, but at a certain point after 12 years, that's also where I met James Armstrong, who's a blues player who was on High Tone at the time, and he got he was attacked in his house and got his hand. He was a guitar player, singer, and got his hand all cut up. So he needed a guitar player to go on the road. So he would just sing, and I played guitar, in the band, and I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved back to New York, and played some around New York, but I was kind of more migrating to more of the writing thing. I mean, I didn't want to go back and do the $50 gigs, in Manhattan.
Mm.
So I did some of that. I put another band together, made another record, there that we put out, but it became more about, the writing than the gigging at that point. And then after another 12 years back there, my new wife and I decided to get out of New York, and we decided to move to Nashville because I heard they needed guitar players.
They didn't have enough.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so we moved down to Nashville. Well, because we could sell our apartment in New York and buy a house, a car, and have money left over in Nashville. So, so that worked out. And then, down here, I mean, I had gotten into the electronic aspect of guitar playing in New York through these Warper parties they used to have. I guess they were semi-sponsored by Ableton,
Mhm.
Ableton Live. Are you familiar with that software?
Yeah. Hmm.
So I guess I was writing about it. At the time, I was writing about it for. I was also writing for Future Music, which is one of those computer music magazines that because we were owned at that point. Guitar One was owned by Future, and so I started writing for them too, and I was learning about all these Ableton, about plugins, and all this stuff, and trying to figure out how that could work with guitar. And I went to this Warper party. Actually, the first one, Sean Pelton, the drummer on Saturday Night Live.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, a great drummer. I mean, I knew him in New York some, and he was into that, into making loops with Ableton, and he invited me down to a Warper party to see him play with Dave Hill, who at the time was the head of Ableton US, I think, at that
Mhm.
time. And I went to that one, and I think it was just them playing, and but then I went to an official Warper party, and there were three guys doing things with guitars and Ableton. So I started doing that, plugging straight into an interface and using Ableton for effects and looping and all that kind of stuff, a lot of ambient stuff. And it was a great, really supportive scene. I mean, I was just getting into it, but they'd give me like a 20-minute opening slot at these things, and so I'd gotten into that before I moved to Nashville, and I'm thinking I'm going to get to Nashville, and I guess I just got to give that up because it's going to be all country, blues, rock, stuff all the time. But there was a guy down here, Chris Davis, who was sponsoring. He was producing kind of avant-garde shows. So he had Mary Halverson, come down and
Wow.
play. He had Gian Riley, Terry Riley's son, is a great guitar player. He
Okay.
put on a show with him, and he started having me open some of those shows, doing my laptop thing. So I got to do that, and I did for the first 5 years I lived here. that's pretty much all the guitar playing I did out, except for a couple of gigs with, there were a couple of New York people that I used to play with in New York who lived down here, and I'd play with them on occasion, doing their stuff. One was this woman, Josie Kuhn, who's amazing singer and great songwriter, and we had a lot of fun. But for the most part, that was it. And then after about 5 years, I met these guys. This guy Mike Cullison, who was a country singer songwriter who wrote songs that sounded like they could have been. You'd think, oh, is that a Waylon Jennings tune, or is that a Merle Haggard tune, or is that But no, they're all his tunes. And so we put a band together doing that. And we started playing, all the hipster clubs in town. These people seem to love it. So right up until COVID, we were starting to play quite a bit. Of course, you don't make any money, I mean,
Yeah.
like, I don't know if you make money playing in LA, but in New in New
Right
York,
now, no, but
but I mean, in
picking
places like
up.
New York and LA, and it's supply and demand for one
Yeah.
thing. You're playing places like Nashville, New York, and LA. They don't have to pay anything because there's 1,000 people that'll do it for next to nothing. So
Yeah.
for the most part, it's hard to make money. But we had a great time, and until COVID hit, and that was it for that. You know.
So that's cool to hear that there's an kind of an avant-garde open scene like that in Nashville, because people always think of Nashville, I mean, not just country, but just commercial music in general. And LA has always had that, which is what I love about being out here. Obviously, New York for sure has it, but that's cool that Nashville has it as well.
Yeah, you have the whole Vinny, what's his name? Vinny Goya,
Yeah, yeah.
that whole scene that Nels
Alex
Klein
Klein.
started on, and then G Stinson, and those guys. I used to love those records. I mean, or the GEs made a bunch of great records, and of course Nels has become Nels.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I knew there was that kind of scene going on in LA, and I'm trying to remember. I mean, there wasn't. Well, yeah, there was a scene in the Bay Area also, of course, because one of the main bands I played in, original bands I played in there, was called the Potato Eaters, and it had people who played with the Residents, and Fred Frith, and there was definitely avant-garde influences. So it was a pop band, but we had the drummer Gino Robert is now considered one of the premier avant-garde percussionist free improvisers in the
Mhm.
world. But he was a slamming drummer too. I mean, he is a
Yeah.
slamming drummer. So we were playing something more along the lines of Talking Heads meets King Crimson type
Wow.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah, and it did pretty well. We played the Great American Music Hall a couple of times, and had a decent crowd, and it went pretty well. We had somebody repping us to the labels, but we were already all too old for the labels to be interested in,
Mhm.
and so there was that aspect of it. But yeah, the LA scene seems really healthy and thriving in a lot of ways. I used to. Did you ever know Morris Tepper down out in LA?
No, it's funny, like that whole scene, like I'm aware of it and I've like, been to some shows in that scene, but I'm definitely not like, I don't know all the guys and all that kind of stuff. I need to get to know all those guys better.
Yeah, I don't know what Morris is doing now. I mean, he's also an artist. If you see that drawing painting on my wall behind me, that's his.
Oh,
He played guitar with Captain Beefheart at one point.
wow.
So he and one of the guys in the Potato Eaters were friends. So when we'd go down to LA, we'd stay with him, and that's how I met him. But yeah, he was. I don't know if he was part of that scene, but he was. There was definitely a scene there. So
Yeah.
I was reading your bio. I mean, you grew up in Florida. Did you grow up, was Val in Florida also?
Yeah, so Val and I went to high school together, and when we were in high school, he was like straight from Romania. He was like this new kid in town, and he was trying to fit in and everything. And all my friends and I, we were pretty like we were like big brothers to him, but we were kind of rough on him, hazing him a little bit. But we loved him right away because he was just a great kid, and he got really into guitar, and I had already been playing a few years, and then I started teaching him some things, and then he went to my guitar teacher, and then we just became friends and played together ever since. And now he's a great guitar player living in Nashville. So
Yeah, I mean, I met him at a blues jam here. He was the kind of MDing a blues jam in Nashville, so that's where we met. But then I saw you lived in. When did you live in New York?
I lasted a summer when I was in New York, like 96. I only lasted a summer. I didn't go with enough money. And it's a long story, but I ran out of money, and it was just, I saw where it was going, and I just quickly was like, this is not for me. I'm married now, and at the time my wife wasn't with me, and I don't know. I just wanted to go back to Florida, and the lifestyle. I love New York. I love visiting, but it wasn't really, living there wasn't for me. So I didn't stay too long. But I saw a lot of great music. It was incredible.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
nothing like it. I mean, anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
you can go out on any given night and see just world class music for nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
basically, you
Yeah.
go down to 55 bar. I remember when I came back from San Francisco. San Francisco was interesting musically because there were great musicians there, but the pool was really shallow. So
Mhm.
after you got through the first two guitar players or three guitar players, two drummers, three drummers, two bass players, once you got through those, it dropped off steeply.
Wow.
I
Interesting.
mean, and wasn't yeah, I mean, well, just, I mean, steeply meaning compared to New York, I mean,
Sure.
I certainly, I wasn't terrible, but I was way down the ladder.
Yeah.
You know, in New York, I'd be way down the ladder. In San Francisco, I was a little further up the ladder. Let's put it that way. So when I got back to New York, one of the first things I did was I went to 55 Bar, and I think I was to see Mike Stern, and Ben Porowski was playing drums, and I think they did half a tune and then threw him a solo, and it was just it's an energy thing. There's an energy to the playing in New York
Yeah.
that is unlike anything you will find anywhere else in the world. It's just
Mhm.
they hit the stage and they're out for blood, from like minute one. There's not because you don't live in New York because it's an easy place to live,
Yeah.
So if you're living there, it's to do it,
Yeah.
do it to death. And it's because it's the only place you can do it. And you put up with the filth and the heat and the cold and the subways and the crime and everything else
Yeah.
because you need to be there to do what you're doing. And, so when you get a chance to do it, there's no slacking around, which, I didn't find. I mean, like I say, I played with some great people in San Francisco, and there were some great players in San Francisco, but there was a lot of, it just didn't have that energy. Even the
Sure.
really good players didn't have that energy.
Well, there's an intensity to it, like in my case, like I had some crappy job, and all I did was work. And I would go out, but I would be exhausted all the time. And I'd go out till 8 in the morning, and then go to work the next day, and then be wiped out for 2 days. I met so many musicians that were like working two or three jobs, and they stopped playing music
Yeah.
because they were working all the time. And I was like, why are you still here if you're not playing music? What's the point? And they were like, yeah, I don't know. And I was like, nah, this is not, I just, for some reason, I wasn't in the position. I probably should have stuck it out longer, but I went back to Florida, and then I realized my wife's family was in LA. And when I came out here, I was like, this is more my tempo, because I like the weather. I hate cold weather. I love the beaches, and this had kind of everything I needed. And one of the first things I saw here was Nels Klein. And that's when I got really excited, because that would never happen in Miami. I'm watching this guy doing this crazy loops and avant-garde stuff. And I thought, this is where I want to be, plus all the great jazz players as well. So that's where I went, Miami, New York, and LA. And I've been here 21 years now. It's crazy.
So what do you mostly do in LA? Are you gigging or teaching or?
I've always taught. That's my main source of income, has been teaching. I mean, I've always gigged as well, but like I try to be more picky on my gigs. I don't do all kinds of music and all kinds of things. I just want to, I'm primarily a jazz guitar player. I want to do creative music. I want to play jazz, and I want to do, I've done a lot of singer-songwriter stuff, any kind of creative music. And so yeah, I've always done that and teach. So teaching's a big part of how I make a living. But I'm putting out a new CD every couple of years and playing with as many people as I can. And it's been crazy the last 2 years. LA was heavily shut down like New York. And there's gigs now, things are starting to come back and you can play, but it's just kind of like starting from scratch again. So it's everyone's like easing back into normalcy, I guess you could say.
Cool. Well, let's talk about these callings, because you're not buying those callings playing jazz. I'll tell you that.
What's
So
that?
I said you're not buying all these callings guitars playing jazz. It must be the teaching. Are you? Do you have any kind of relationship with them, or you just love those guitars?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I definitely couldn't buy them full price. Let's just say that. But yeah, I do have a relationship with them. I got kind of hooked up with them at NAMM, I'd say, wow, 6, 8 years ago, something like that. They're amazing people, the nicest guys in the world. And they do whatever they can for you. And they're a dream.
So, are you an
So
official representative, or?
I don't know what you'd call it. I mean, I guess I'm an artist of theirs, but like I'm not really on their website. There's all different levels. There's other friends of mine that are like that, but they're not. Some of them are more they're more seen than others. Like there's a guy, Justine Gilbertson. He's a great guitar player, and he's very well known. He does thousands of videos constantly promoting him, and so he's definitely one of their artists. And there's a lot of obviously famous people who are their artists as well. So I'm kind of like under the scene kind of a type of guy, but I keep buying them. I keep buying more and more. I bought my first one, and it was like I fell in love with it, and it was like my dream guitar. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll get another one. Then I got another one, and it just keeps going. It's a
Yeah,
disease, right?
yeah. Well, I noticed you're playing Angel Eyes on that archtop one. Yeah, that's one of the few standards I ever learned.
Oh,
But I love that song. But yeah, you play a lot of my favorite songs. Like for Christmas, you played "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," which is
yeah, that was just a little thing I just put together.
that's not just one of my favorite Christmas songs. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. It's just a
Beautiful.
great song, especially when
Yeah.
they sing the original, really depressing lyrics.
Oh, I have to hear those. I can't remember how those go.
Oh, it's what is it? It's like instead of "Hang a Star from the Highest Bough," they sing "We'll Have to Muddle Through Somehow."
Oh,
And most people don't sing it. It's coming back. The youngsters are bringing the depressing lyrics back, but it's fun.
must have been written in the Great Depression.
Yeah, well, it was written originally for "Meet Me in St. Louis," for Judy
Okay.
Garland for "Meet Me in St. Louis," but they rejected the lyrics because they were so depressing. I think she sings the muddle through somehow, but there were something about "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. It may be your last" was actually the
Oh
first
God.
two lines. Yeah, yeah,
That's heavy, man.
yeah. It's really dark. I mean, there's a young woman. Every year I post like 4 or 5 versions of it on Facebook, and there's a young woman who actually went back and found the really depressing ones and recorded them all. But it's just such a beautiful melody. It's a beautiful changes and all that kind of stuff. So the stuff you were doing sings like for a long time. I mean, I guess you're alternating, but you did a lot of straight ahead stuff. But the trio eclectic, I mean, it has to be said, obviously, is a heavy, more Paul Motion influenced
Yes, for sure.
type set. I think don't you guys even have a tune called Motion? It's not on the new record, but I think you have a tune called Motion.
Yeah, that record's actually a few years old. I have a straight ahead record that I just put out a couple weeks ago. I thought Val, I thought he had sent you a link to that. I could send it to you if you want to ever check it out or whatever. That one's more straight ahead for sure. I go back and forth, My heroes are guys like, Frizzell, of course, Matheny and Schofield. And those guys, they kind of jump around and do all different kinds of projects. And that's kind of like the way I want to be, it's like, I have a lot of straight ahead records, but the trio eclectic thing is for sure influenced by, the Motion Trio. I mean, one of my life changing gigs that I had seen was when I was in college in Miami. Bill Frisell came, and I had just gotten into him. I was already into like Metheny and Schofield and all the greats, but Frisell was like, he was kind of like my new discovery. And I had started listening to those Motion on Broadway and Motion records where they do all the standards. And I was just shocked at the way Bill played standards. It was just like literally from another planet. I couldn't believe how different it was. And I loved it. And he had come and done a solo guitar concert at this club in South Beach. And I went there and I had an idea of what he was like, but I didn't know a lot about him. And he came out and he's doing his loops and he's doing like Days of Wine and Roses, but with all these weird loops going on. It sounded like it was from Mars. And I remember it was one of those experiences where it was like so intense. It was almost like I couldn't take it. You ever have a situation like that where you're like, I can't take it anymore. It's too much. It was really life-changing, And ever since then, I've been a Bill Frisell fanatic. And yeah, we got into the Paul Motion Trio. We lived in New York. We saw him a whole bunch of times at the Avant-Garde. And I've seen that group many times. My musical partner for many years is a guy named Dave Goldberg, a great sax player. And we have a couple quartet records together. We've always done all original music. That's what we always do. But we started doing, Dave was also a huge fan of that group. He loves Lovano. So we started playing duo in like little coffee shops, and we would just improvise with loops. And we really, really enjoyed it. It was really fun, and we got good at it. We just felt like it was something that we were natural at, So eventually when we moved out here, I thought, let's put a trio together, And obviously it's a tribute to the Paul Motion Trio, and the first tune on the first record is called Motion. But we definitely write things that are different. Some of the funny thing is the records, it's all compositions, but we used to never play compositions. It was always open stuff. So I kind of feel like I want to do another record again and have it be only improvised.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
it's the obviously the influence is obvious, but you guys have your own take on it, which is,
Yeah.
first of all, it's just great to see somebody being influenced by that because it was, I mean, I've seen him also. I saw him in San Francisco 2 or 3 times. I saw him in New York, a bunch of times at the Vanguard. And for my money, I mean, you talk about life changing, and it's every time it was the most amazing music of any kind I'd ever seen. It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, to see, and I've talked about this and written about this because there are very few groups in any genre of players of that level that stay together long enough to have a thing.
Mhm.
And when they stay, there's plenty of groups that stay together a long time and have a thing, but the players are not, I mean, in pop music it happens and it's great stuff. The Rolling Stones, it's great, and
Mhm.
it happens, over time. But when you get a group like that, or in Nashville, there's this guy Pat McLaughlin, who's a great singer songwriter, one of the funkiest rhythm guitar players and most soulful singers you've ever heard. And he's had a band with two of the top session guys in Nashville, Kenny Greenberg on guitar and Michael Rhodes on bass, and usually Greg Morrow, who's another top session player on drums. And these guys, I've been seeing them since I started coming down for the NAMM show 20 years ago. So they've been playing together for 20 years. So when you go to a show like that, what you're seeing is guys who are at the top of their playing game, playing music they know inside out,
Yeah.
and they're playing it, and they've been playing together. They have that thing of playing together for 20 years. Other than them and the Paul Motion Band, I'd be hard pressed to think of another group. I mean, Ivan Arset, do you know him? The Norwegian
For the
guitar
name.
player?
I need to get into all those guys. That's one thing I was going to talk to you about, checking out your thing. There's so many of these avant-garde guys that I want to check out that I'm not aware of. I need to be have my antlers on more, you know. I know Frizzell and Nels and other guys, but there's so many others that I just need to get into and check out.
Well, you could certainly start with Ivan because he has a bunch of records out, and he 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 his band has been together, I think, 9 years at this point. So they have that thing. If you check out some YouTube live stuff, you'll hear that they can go anywhere together, and they're all phenomenal players. He has two drummers, bass, and him, and he uses a laptop, and it's just great stuff. I discovered him because like many of us, there was a time when I would buy anything on ECM. And Nils Pilder Molvar's first record on ECM, he was a trumpeter, and Ivan was on that, and it was a record of, at the time, the club culture in Europe was really big. So they were using a DJ and, who was doing samples and DJ stuff and guitar, bass, and what was there? It was something else. Anyway, and Nils was play like John Hassel through effects, and it just blew my mind. It was amazing stuff. And oddly enough, I had done a session in San Francisco with this woman was on, Ina Kumanis, who done some records. She used to work with Marilyn Mazer, who was also on ECM, and Ivan was in Marilyn's band. So when we did this session, Ina said, because she heard the way I played, and she said, you'd really like this guitar player, Ivan Arset. So that, I don't know if that's what made me get the Nils Petter Molvar thing, because I saw his name on the back and recognized it, or I'd already heard it, or I just happened to find it. But anyway, the point of that is, I mean, his band has been together 9 years, but the Motion band was together, what, 20, 30 years?
Yeah, something like that, since the early 80s.
And I'm sure you've seen that. You see them, they go on stage and they could just do anything, go anywhere, do anything. And it just, especially, and also the trio format helped. Bill wasn't tied down by a bass player, so he
Yeah.
could take it anywhere he wanted, and just the way they worked, it's just phenomenal. And the trio eclectic, I have to say, captures that spirit. And your looping work sounds great on it, but it
Oh
doesn't sound
man,
like
thanks.
Bill. It sounds like looping, but your style of looping and your guitar approach, but it has some of the compositions for me have that Motion thing, because I think he's a really underrated composer, and
Yeah.
they have that almost folk music type sound to some of them,
hmm
which is another thing. And so I was blown away, and I'm pretty sure that, yeah, that was the link that Val sent me. And when I heard that, I said, oh yeah, I gotta talk to this guy because this is great stuff.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like when you do the loops right away, people start, oh, it's Bill Frisell, but I always think, I'm like, no, but I don't want to copy what he's doing. The loops thing, I mean, he didn't invent that per se, so it is open for anybody to do. Plus, I mean, when I was like a little kid, I was interested in that stuff. Like I had this old Ibanez delay rack that had a looping function to it, and I didn't know anything about any kind of avant-garde music. I just loved the idea of doing that. So I would fool around with electronics, even though I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't know anything about it, but I had always had an interest in that kind of stuff. And then when I heard Frizzell, I was like, wow, it was just that opened everything. But yeah, we try to do like different kinds of compositions. Some of the stuff that we do is much more tight composed. It's a hard way to play. I mean, man, I'll tell you, we don't gig as much as I'd like. We kind of would do a CD release party and a couple gigs and then nothing. And then we do another record. So I wish we play more in that regard. But every time we do, I'll tell you, man, it's hard. It's like, I feel like I could barely pull it off. So it just makes me realize how great those guys are, because they make it look so easy.
Yeah, yeah, but you talk to Bill and he's talking about how, oh, this is hard,
Oh, he says so? Okay, good. That makes
Well,
me
you
feel
talked
better.
about, I mean, like talking about when he put out the last solo record, which, quote unquote solo record,
Yeah.
but it was just him, and loops and stuff like that. I mean, I interviewed him and he was talking about how, playing solo just terrified him, but
Me
he's,
too.
but he makes it sound like he didn't do it that often, but, um, But you said you saw him do it in, in Florida, and I saw him after I moved to San Francisco. I think it was one of the times I came back to visit New York. He was doing a solo gig in a loft in down on off Broadway somewhere down there. So I know he was doing it back then, and that would have been '87 or something like that. So
Yeah.
and he did that record for Zorn that wasn't, it was a kind of one off on a different label. That was it was more an avant-garde type solo record, but it was just him.
I saw him in the last time I was in New York. He was playing solo guitar at the Vanguard, doing all John Zorn's music. So maybe that was around the same time.
Yeah, yeah, maybe yeah, is I mean, it's amazing. And you talk about not looping like him. How could you? I mean, the way he
Yeah.
loops, it's like playing chess. It's like he's thinking 6 moves ahead. I mean,
Right.
because you don't hear him laying the loop, and then all of a sudden he'll step on it and it pops back at a perfect place, doing it double
Yes.
time,
Mhm.
doing something double time that goes with what he's doing then, and it's mind-boggling.
It's really a crapshoot because he totally has a mastery of the looping, of how to chop it up, how to do the reverse, how to bring it in, when to bring it in. When I do it, I do not have that kind of mastery. I mean, literally, I am just going for it. And sometimes it's a disaster. but on the records, we pulled it off. And the other cool thing with my group is my sax player loops, which is different. So he does loops too. So with the both of us, it's a little tricky though, because with both of us doing it could be like turns into cacophony sometimes. So we have to be really careful.
Are you using a DL4?
I did for a long time, and then I always stick with the line six stuff because it seems like, and you would know way more than me about this. I might pick your brain about it because I'm always a little in the dark with technology, but I always stick with the line six because most of the looping things that are out there, it's all about being able to hold a lot of time, but you can't manipulate the loop. I want to be able to chop it up, reverse, drop the octave. And the line six stuff always has that. So like I went to an M9, which I did. I think those records were both on my M9, which is like a multi-effects thing, but it also has their looper. And I just got the Helix HX effects. So it's basically like a Helix without the amp modeling. And the Helix has all the looping stuff. And that's like my favorite one. That thing sounds incredible. So I always stick with the line six. I did start on the DL4 though.
Yeah, most of us did. Well,
Yeah,
actually, truth be told, I mean, when I started looping on the old Lexicon
right.
rack looper that they made for a while there. I forgot what it was called.
Oh, I
But
remember that. I remember I wanted to get one of those.
yeah, that's what I started on when I was in a band in San Francisco with this singer-songwriter who was basically Joni Mitchell level singer-songwriter.
Oh my God.
She,
Really?
she was, yeah, she was an amazing singer. She wrote amazing songs where she dropped, in these tunings where she dropped the low E down to C or the high E down to D, or, and then I'd have to figure out how to play her voicings or something that went with her voicings on guitar.
Mhm.
But somehow looping really seemed to work in that band, and I did just simple ambient, stuff. But yeah, I don't even know if the DL4 was out yet, but Lexicon had that rack thing that you could. It was part of that cheaper line that they brought out for a while,
I
and
remember that. Was it the Replifex? Does that sound right?
now I don't think that's what it was called, but
Okay, yeah. I
I
can't.
think
I
there might have
remember
been
that
something
one.
called the Replifex. They brought it out, I think, even before the Oberheim Echoplex, which was
Okay.
that's the one. Do you know? Have you met Andre LaFace out there? Do you know Andre?
No, no.
He's a loop master. He's a
Wow.
total loop master. He does. Yeah, he was working with the Oberheim, also put out by Gibson. I think Gibson bought Oberheim, and they were putting it out for a while because that was a looper where you could drop sections into the middle of the loop, and
Wow.
yeah, that's a whole other kind of looping. So Andre does things, where he kind of does grooves that he creates by dropping those things into the loop, and he calls it like kind of hip hop based stuff, and yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. But
I did
yeah,
see David Torn once at the Blue Whale, and that was like mind blowing. That was
yeah,
crazy.
David does beautiful stuff also.
Yeah.
A whole other approach. I mean, his stuff is all about running it through big delays and reverbs and getting that real textural stuff going.
What's the hot looping stuff now? Because I know you're into playing through a laptop and all that. I mean, like, what's the things I should be looking at for looping type stuff for now?
Well, doing the laptop thing is a whole separate thing. I mean, I started out, Ableton has its own looper in it, and there's three or four different plug-in loopers that you can use within Ableton, one of which emulates that Oberheim type looping. I mean, you have to set up, but you have to set up the MIDI business with it, and I never really got that going with a foot switch, controlling stuff in Ableton with a foot switch. I mean, I use, a tabletop controller, like either the Korg, or now I'm using, I don't even remember who makes it. I think it's an Alesis, a bigger Alesis thing with buttons and knobs and
Hmm.
sliders, more like a mixer that I can turn things on and off with. But since I don't do any timed loops.
Right.
It's all ambient, so I can just start the looper with my hand and play and, loop it around and add stuff on top of it. But then what I got into was iPad stuff. There's some amazing loopers on iPad that do all sorts. There's one called Gauss that you can put a loop in, and then it can sync it to your tempo, and pop it up octaves and down octaves within the loop, so it creates this kind of sequencer type effect out of just a
Wow.
simple loop. So I use stuff like that, and I mean, actually most of the stuff in the iPad is loop based. There's a thing called iDensity that does granular looping, so it really changes the sound of the loop. There's another one called Sampler where you put a loop in and then you can manipulate it to do different. You can manipulate it. The nice thing about an iPad is you can manipulate things with your hand. Of course, when you play guitar, that doesn't work as well, but you can stop playing because you got a loop going and then make the loop do different things with your
Hmm.
hand if you want. And so yeah, the possibilities are endless. I mean, there's a bunch of new hardware loopers too. Boss keeps bringing them out, and then there's I can't remember the one that Andre is now working with a new guy that brought out one that's supposed to do a lot of the stuff like the Oberheim does. But then do you know Mike Baguetta? Have you heard Mike play?
No,
He
no, I'm
plays
pretty
with
ignorant with that stuff,
he
unfortunately.
plays with Mike Watt from I can't remember some a punk band, and Steven, they have a
Yeah.
band called MSSV, I think it's called. But Mike is, he was kind of mentored by David Torn, but he uses the old Eventide box delay box that they made. They had that series that was delay, modulation, and reverb.
Right.
He uses the delay box because,
Timeline. Is that what that
yeah, I
is?
think it's the timeline, because
Yeah.
it does the looping. It allows you to shift the loop around and do things within a loop, kind of like the Oberheim, but he's just like anything else, is whatever you learn, to really master. I mean, that's why Bill still uses the Line 6, because he still uses the DL4 because he's just
Right.
got it down,
And that's the thing. Like, I've never been like even though I love technology, I'm not great at it. Like playing with a laptop or an iPad seems really cool, but I've never been great with. I mean, I know how to use a computer and how to record a little bit, but like the whole laptop Ableton Live thing just scares the hell out of me. Where like I got my little box, and I feel like I'll never even master that. And Bill feels the same way about the DL4. I'm sure, you know.
Yeah. Oh, that's the way. I mean, whatever works for you. I mean, I
Yeah.
got into the computer thing because I was writing about it, and it seemed interesting, and it was, a new learning curve, and it was, and it, also, I mean, Ableton was great for composing and, doing stuff like that. And, but yeah, I mean, there's a whole, it's a whole other thing using a laptop. And, it's, I mean, the two things that most people are afraid of are really things that you don't need to be afraid of, because first of all, they're really reliable. I mean, in all the, at the times I used it, it never crashed. I mean, at this point, the latency is so minimal that, it doesn't even enter into the picture. So that, that those parts of it are fine. But yeah, hardware, I mean, a lot of people do just hardware, G.E. Stinson, I know, does, he's a hardware guy. God, you watch stuff of him online, and he's got like 3 tables worth of the stuff. Um, I'm trying to think. Well, Nels, of course, he still
Yeah.
uses that
Is it
the
16-second
electro-harmonic
delay? Is that
16
what you use?
second, yeah, the electro-harmonic 16 second, and of course that presents nightmares for him because they don't make them anymore, and I don't know how many he owns at this point, but
Yeah.
they weren't the most sturdy things. I mean, I worked for electro-harmonics back when that thing was invented.
Right.
Back in I used to work for them. I worked for them a bunch of times over the years, not in technology, but in sales. And I mean, Mike's philosophy was to make stuff as cheaply as possible, so it was affordable. I mean, his heart was in the right place, but the whole thing with electro harmonics in the early days was that you had to buy. If you're going to take it on the road, you better buy 2 or 3, because they're gonna die.
Yeah.
So, which was good for sales, and
Sure. Well, they have some loopers now. Like there was one, I think it was called the 4550. It was
yeah.
like a 4-track looper, and it had a pedal. And I remember thinking like, this is more than what I need. But now they have these smaller ones. Have you tried any of those?
No, I mean, not that I can recall. I think the last one they sent me was the 4550,
Hmm.
and I mean, the looper that I really liked, the last looper I tried I really liked was the Pigtronics. Their looper, especially for doing timed loops, if you really do want to try and nail a groove loop, their switching just seems so much faster and than the, like, I stand in awe of anybody who can do timed loops on a DL4, because there's a lag when you hit the switch that, it's hard enough playing something and stepping on a switch at the right time if it's at the exact time when you want to play it. But with that lag, you have to step on it a little before you want to end the loop. Otherwise, it doesn't seem to work. So
Yeah.
it's really hard to do a loop that's in supposed to be in time. I mean, like if you're trying to do a rhythm part and then loop it, a timed rhythm part and loop it to nail. There are people who can do it, but it's really difficult. Whereas with the Pigtronics, it just seemed a lot easier. When you stepped on the button, boom, it happened. And
Yeah, I've tried that for years, doing like a rhythmic loop. And you see guys where they'll do layers of riffs and they make songs out of it. That's not really my interest, to be honest. But I tried to do it rhythmically, and God, I would practice it with a metronome, where I'd be playing something with a metronome and then really try to get it on time. And it would be good for a little while, but then it would eventually fade out of time. You
oh,
know?
drift, yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
they definitely. I mean, yeah, that's the other thing, is trying to do it where it's. But if you get it to where it sounds okay, that's fine. And once you get the first loop, then you play everything to that, and it's fine. But if you're trying to get that loop, unless there's like some of the electroharmonics thing actually has a clock. Some of theirs have a clock where you can sync it to a clock,
Mhm.
and that's the thing with the Ableton too. If you could nail, well, yeah, if you can nail it. I mean, also with Ableton, they have their whole clip system which makes it easy because you can actually set that up. If you're working with that to a tempo, and then you can have it quantized so that it'll only come in on the beat and only go out on the beat.
Oh, that's nice.
So you step on it like a beat before or whatever, or you give yourself whatever you need, 2 beats, and then you play and step on it, and it goes out as the beat comes around. Yeah, I mean that was kind of the whole point of Ableton. The clip modes are what, but they don't work for ambient because you get a click at the end, because you can't like fade into them and fade out of them like you can. And Ableton has a looper. It took them years of people screaming at them that they wanted one, but they have a plug-in, a native plug-in called Looper, where you can do that. You can't do that with the clips, but with the clips you can do. It makes it really easy if you do want to do if you do want to layer down parts. And I mean, you can get really fancy with it. That's one of the things I saw at some of these Warper parties is guys would go in and layer down a verse, and then layer down a chorus, and then they could have a foot controller and switch back and forth between the verse and the chorus. And I mean that's why that whole system became so popular with touring acts, because I mean if they're playing with tracks, whoever's running the system could, they could make, if they want the solo to go 5 bars longer, they can just do that within the tracks. They don't have to have it a certain amount of bars. It can be, you just trigger it. You trigger the solo section, those tracks come in. And there was even a guy in Keith Urban's band who was running 4 iPads with samples in them of banjo loops and like all the instruments that they didn't want to bring an extra guy on tour to play, and he was triggering them live through. I don't think that was Ableton because they don't have Ableton for iPads, but he was somehow triggering live loops. Right, must have been synced to the click, but he was triggering live loops on stage. It was time for a banjo part. He just hit it in real time, and it would come in and play for the length of time they needed it. And then I don't know if he triggered it out or went out, but yeah, the technology, I mean, is there. But everybody, you just choose your poison, basically.
Yeah.
And as everybody says, just learn it. I mean, there's a danger, and I'm subject to it. Myself is a danger because there's so much stuff out there. It gets back to the gear thing we were discussing at the beginning of how guitar playing has become more gear oriented.
Yeah.
There's a danger of people, getting so obsessed with the gear that, they buy a piece of gear, and this happens all the time. They have to have the latest, pedal of whatever kind, and then they play with it for a little while, and then a new one comes out, and ooh, shiny object, and they sell that one
Yeah.
and get the new one, and they never take the time to learn how to get the sound out of whatever it was they just, they bought. So
And
it's
then you can just spend your whole life screwing with pedals. I mean, that's, my thing is, I have limited time. I teach a lot. I have a family, and it's like, I see all these pedals around there and I want to try all of them, but like, I'm just trying to get good at playing jazz guitar. I'm always transcribing and playing tunes, and it's like, I just got to do that. It's like so much work.
Now, there's a lot of great musicians down around the Miami area.
Yeah.
What do you prefer about Los Angeles to living there?
Well, first of all, I wanted to live somewhere new just because I grew up there my whole life. The main reason, there was a lot of great musicians, there still are. At the time when I was, in my gigging time, now it looks like it's pretty good down there, but there was just nowhere to play as far as like any kind of creative music or straight ahead jazz or anything like that. I mean, there's always been tons and tons of gigs of cover bands. Like you can play
Right.
Jimmy Buffett every night if you want,
Yeah.
but like, there was no jazz club. There was clubs that would have jazz once in a while, and but like there was just nothing went anywhere. Nobody was doing original jazz, nobody was doing creative music or avant-garde or anything like that. At least when I was there. I don't know what it is now, but it's just, there was just nowhere to play really.
Right.
And then when I came out here, it was, I mean, LA is like anywhere else. There's too many musicians and not enough gigs, but there's still a hell of a lot of great music. I go out every week and see great music, so that was the big difference.
Yeah, yeah. I was planning. Actually, I was planning a trip. I mean, not specifically, but I was definitely planning to go out to LA and spend like a week or
Mhm.
something out there, just because I knew so many people out there. And I sometimes get to see them at a NAMM show in January for a couple of minutes. But I really wanted to explore LA and go out there and because I'd hear Scott and Bruce talk about the clubs out there and the places they play and I know there's a scene, and then there's the whole Blake Mills scene out there.
Yeah, it's a whole other scene.
Yeah, which have you heard his last record with Pino
I
Palladino?
gotta check his record. I've listened to some of his stuff. I listened to his interview with you, and very interesting guy who's talking about that old Roland synth. I mean, that was really cool.
Right. Well, that's yeah. I mean, I had wanted to interview him for that record. He did a whole record with that synth,
I
and
gotta hear that.
we never got that together. But getting to talk to him now, yeah, I had to talk about that because that's so unusual. But yeah, he's a beautiful player, and that record with him and Pino and that sax player Sam, who I also interviewed him for. I interviewed him for Jazz Times, I think, because
Okay.
he's a fascinating player. He uses effects and gets sounds out of his saxophone that you would never imagine. I think I first saw him in some Ry Cooder videos because he was doing it with Ry Cooder, and then he does his own gigs and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of scenes out there, and I'd love to come out and check them out. I mean, do these places pay anything, or you just give you an opportunity to play?
A lot of them do. It feels like, I mean, when you say do you get paid? And yeah, maybe $100 or something, but it seems like, see, we had a great jazz club called the Blue Whale that was like New York level. It was amazing. And
Yeah,
all the
I've
New
seen
York
some.
guys would always come out. You probably heard of it, right?
Yeah, I've seen some great videos. Well, Julian Lodge did a live
Record there.
recording there, and yeah.
Yeah. I think I was there that night actually, but and that closed down unfortunately. So, but we're all of us musicians, man. We're like cockroaches. We just go to new places, There's another place here in LA that's a beautiful club. It's called Sam First. It's near the airport. And it's very small, but you feel like you're in a living room. But it's great, man. It's a great little club. Great sound. They have great music in there. So that's kind of like the place right now. But there's other places. There's places, and it's funny. I've been here a long time, and still it's like, oh, what's this place? I haven't been there before, and who are these guys over here? Because there's like any city, there's like little scenes. Like there's that Blake Mills scene. I heard his music. I love what I've heard, but I don't know his scene. I haven't hung out and checked him out more. I need to do that,
Yeah.
and there was like the Nels Klein scene. I saw some of that stuff, and there's all kinds of little scenes. There's a very traditional swinging scene where like they're real strict about it and nothing modern at all, So there's all kinds of scenes like that.
Jazz Nazis.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
Anything past 1959 is crap, that kind of thing. But that
Amazing that still exists. Is it mostly
yeah,
old guys that play there, or are there
no,
actually young
no, it's
people
young
too?
guys. Young guys are like that.
Yeah.
There's a whole, like, you ever heard of the jazz drummer Jeff Hamilton?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, him and John Clayton, the bass player, they're kind of like from that Ray Brown, Shelly Man lineage, and they're amazing. They're great, and they have a whole generation of younger cats that they brought up in their way to play, and that's cool. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I think there's room for everybody. I want to live in a world where there's everything. If I want to go hear some really hard swing and hard bop, I think that's awesome. And then next night here's some free jazz, next night here's some avant-garde, whatever, just whatever. It's fun having everything at your fingertips.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is nice. I mean, and there's some guys doing it really well.
Yeah,
It's just that to a certain extent, some of that seems antithetical to the spirit of jazz,
sure,
as far as
sure.
I'm
Yeah,
concerned. I mean, it's the jazz should be flowing and moving and
Yeah,
growing and changing and it becomes, I mean, it becomes repertoire, it becomes classical
it
music
does.
at that point, and
Yeah,
which is fine, like as you say. I mean, I love hearing a bluegrass band doing, old style bluegrass. If they do it, they do it to death and they really do it well, or,
yeah,
anything, or, a blues, a blues guitar player who can really, really play,
yeah,
the old stuff, but really with the space that it's supposed to have, not, filling every bar, every measure with notes after notes after notes. Leave
yeah.
the kind of space that Albert King and BB King and all those guys used to leave and produce the mystery of of that
Hmm.
kind of music. If you're into that, that's great.
Yeah,
But I mean, sometimes a lot of this stuff for me misses the spirit of it. It misses the
yeah,
concept. It becomes either an athletic event or um, or a some sort of restoration type thing. You know,
yeah. It's weird because jazz. I mean, it's been around over 100 years now. I mean, I think about like when I was in high school, young kid just getting into jazz, trying to figure jazz out. And I figure, man, all the eras that I had to deal with, right, to learn the music, right? Well, now there's been like 35 years since then. So now we're supposed to kind of deal with all that now. And it's just like it's maddening, but you can't be an expert on all of it. You just gotta kind of pick your lane and just go with it.
or you pick and choose from all of them. You don't have
Yeah.
to. You don't have to learn all of it, and you don't have to be able to play all of it. I was just
Right.
talking to somebody the other day, and I've heard, I've heard this. I've heard guys diss Schofield and Metheny and go, yeah, they play the same licks all the time, and it's like, but they don't play the same licks all the time, but they play, when they do play licks, repeat licks from time to time. They invented those licks. They're not
Yeah.
repeating somebody else's licks over and over again. And they're
Yeah.
playing those licks because those licks mean something to them.
Yeah.
They relate to those lines or those intervals or those sounds. They relate to those emotionally, and they don't feel they have to play every single thing that everybody has ever played. They don't have to show that they can play every bebop lick that was ever invented. They don't have to
Right.
show that they can play like this guy or like that guy or like the other guy. They've learned all that stuff, absorbed all that stuff, and then it's a process of editing and culling and picking out the stuff that you relate to and says what you want it to say, and that's what develops the style, and that's I think what moves people ultimately, because
Sure. And
it's
I don't even think about those guys as lick players, really. They have maybe phrases or things that they repeat, but I mean, every musician that's ever lived is like that. Nobody ever plays new things all the time. It's never happened
absolutely.
before, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I mean, yeah, there's no way you go. But which ones you choose to do say volumes about who you are,
Right.
and the more my feeling is the more you dilute that by spreading it out amongst just because I mean I stand in awe of these kids that can memorize solos by everyone and play everything super fast and do all that kind of stuff. But it's like where are you? Where are you in the music? I wanna feel you coming through the music, and if they don't, it sounds like an exercise, like Angus Young said from AC/DC. There's a place to practice your scales, but it's not in front of me.
Right. Right. Right.
And it's a place to practice your bebop licks, but it's not in front of me.
Yeah.
Get that shit together on your own, the way and as much as you want, and then come out and say something.
Yeah. And they developed their styles 40, 50 years ago, those guys, what I mean? Like maybe not 50, but they came up with their styles a long time ago, and they have changed and evolved. But like you said, you got your lane and you kind of maybe just stay within there. It's like you don't see Bill Frisell playing stuff in 11/8 and burning fast, and that's just
Oh,
not what he
yeah,
does,
absolutely. Oh, and when you talk about, guys like Jay Clayton and those guys, I mean, those guys are practically back with the originators.
Mhm.
It's like you hear, I mean, when you hear Charlie Parker play, he was inventing that stuff on the
Mhm.
spot.
Right,
When you hear somebody play like Charlie Parker, they're not inventing that. They're
right.
just kind of regurgitating it.
Yeah.
I mean, when you hear, I mean, so some of the, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't expect people to play everything, but that's one reason my respect for Bruce Forman went way up when he did that record where he played Dobro, just him and he was playing, a steel guitar and drums,
With
and
Jake Reed, yeah, yeah. Killer
that,
record.
that was great stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
you can step out of your lane every now and then. You can
sure.
do different things. Like you said, you like to go back and forth between, doing a little more straight ahead and doing the trio eclectic. And, look at Matheny. I mean, he'll do Matheny group sounding stuff with the big kind of orchestrations and,
Yeah,
but then he'll do trio records, which are my personal favorites of
me too.
stuff he does, like the question and answer, where he'll just blow your brains out,
Yeah.
and he'll do a record with Derek Bailey, and he'll do, um, he's done some really noise. He did that one really noisy record that I love, Zero something.
Zero tolerance for silence.
Yeah, Zero Tolerance for Silence. I mean, that's what jazz is about.
Yeah.
You know, is just experiment. Just push the envelope, push your own envelope. Do it. Or not. If I mean,
Yeah.
if you're comfortable playing standards and bebop, go for it. But it's still nice if you can find your own way into it. As like I mean, Oz Noy just did a total standards record.
Okay. I gotta check that out.
Yeah, I mean, he's burning it. I mean, he
Yeah,
grew
yeah,
up
yeah.
doing that. So he's
Yeah.
so it still has some of that Oz Noy thing, but no effects, no distortion.
Hmm.
He's just playing, but he's playing it either on a Strat or on a Gretsch Duo Jet.
Yeah. Oh, I love those guitars.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna
it's
get
funny because
one.
the Julian Lage's new Collings is basically a duo jet.
My guy at Collings, oh my God. Mark, I know his last name. I'm forgetting. I have a terrible memory. But anyway, Althans, Mark Althans. So like we talk every once in a while, and he was like, man, he just got the Julian Lage, and he's like, man, it's the best electric guitar I've ever owned in my life. And I was like, don't tell me this. Like, because I haven't played it, but I played like a Gretsch Duo Jet recently, like kind of similar to the Collings, with the two Dynasonics. I remember playing this going, oh my God, this thing's incredible. So I'm thinking the Collings is probably this times 10. you know,
Well, a lot of those old Gretches, just weren't built really well. I mean, they did,
yeah.
they did. I always found a lot of old Gretches really hard to play. I mean, the new ones are a lot easier to play and a lot, I think, put together better. But yeah, and I'm sure the Collings version is just off the charts.
And it's fully hollow, like the because I played a newer Gretsch, like a Japanese one. Japanese ones are really good. I mean, you played great, but the Collings, even though it doesn't have F holes, it's pretty much hollow. It's a big, excuse me, big chamber. So man, but they're not cheap. I mean, this still costs a lot of money, even for all any of us, so it's like we'll see what happens at the next NAMM. They keep coming up with these new models, and it's just like, oh my God, another one.
Are you going to go in June?
Yeah, for sure. I love it. You go always go on Facebook and all the musicians are like, oh, NAMM. And I'm just like, what's your problem? NAMM is awesome. Yeah, it's loud and you get a headache and everything, but I love it. You get to see all the different, manufacturers, and you're running all your friends, and it's a blast.
Yeah,
It's
I mean, I enjoyed it for many, many years. I mean, it
yeah,
was kind of like summer camp, because you go back and I see people that I only see,
right.
once a year in Anaheim. I have to say the last one to me was kind of it was not good because there was just I think they're letting too many people in who aren't supposed to be there. Too many like kids of guitar store owners or
Yeah,
music store owners who are taking up the time of the people that as a journalist I need to talk to
yeah,
and making probably the most noise as well.
yeah,
So it's they need to get a handle on that, I think, a little bit. And it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I mean, I'd love to go back just because, like I say, for the summer camp aspect of it, to see. I went to the one they had it this summer in Nashville, but it was a ghost town basically. And
really.
yeah, yeah, they didn't get very many. Well, it was the midst of COVID, which we're
Yeah,
still more or less in. So I mean,
yeah,
all other things considered. I mean, have you been going out or have you been playing gigs?
yeah, yeah. I'm going now. COVID really hit me hard. I mean, thank God nobody that I knew got sick or anything, but it was just hard for me to stay home. I felt really cooped up. So the first minute I was able to go out, I started going out. I mean, I'm vaxxed all the way up and I'm being safe as I can, but I'm kind of accepting like, I'll probably get it if I keep going out. But I'm triple vaxxed, I'm
Yeah,
willing to
so you're
take my
probably not going to
chances.
die from it.
No, no.
Yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people that have gotten it since, and most of them are vaxxed, and it did nothing to them because they're vaxxed.
All right.
They were in and out in 3 days, so that was it. So I hope I don't get it, but things are open here. People are going out, so it seems like the Omicron thing's starting to come down. So maybe who knows? Maybe we'll be at the end of this thing. You never know.
Well, here, fingers
Yeah,
crossed. Yeah, because I mean, look, I live in one of the great music towns of
in the
in
world.
the world, and I've seen one show,
Yeah.
outdoor show in 2 years, and that's
Wow.
yeah, and they're and they come up all the time. Robin Ford lives here now, and he plays
Mhm.
this little club in East Nashville a fair amount. You can see him, in a tiny little club.
That's got to be great.
Yeah, it is pretty great, and his new record, by the way, he just released. Well, it's an old record. It's the Blue Line with an organ player, a keyboard player from '96 at Yoshi's in the Bay
Wow.
Area. And it's killing. It's absolutely killing.
Well, I heard his Purple House one, and that one was just fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's
he's
doing
so
doing
good.
great stuff, and he's been seems to be really happy since he's lived here.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, he plays, and that Pat McLaughlin band I was talking about is going to play in April. I hope by then I'll feel comfortable going out, to see it, but who knows? We'll see.
Are you're vaxxed and everything?
Oh yeah, vax boosted, but I
Yeah.
mean, I'm old AF as they say, and my wife has some health issues, and
Mhm.
I mean, we're not so much afraid of getting it as we just don't know what the long COVID thing is with Omicron yet, whether people are going to be, and nobody knows it because
No
it's
one
only been
knows.
around, hasn't been around long enough. The way what constitutes long COVID is like 3 months after, if you're still suffering 3 months after, and Omicron hasn't really been around for over 3 months. So they don't
Right.
know, if people are going to suffer down the line. If it turns out that that's not a thing anymore with Omicron and there isn't a new variant, then we'll be more comfortable going out. I mean, if we just, if it's just a question of getting a flu or a cold, I have to say that's the great thing about not going out and wearing a mask everywhere
You
is
don't
I
get
haven't even had a
sick.
cold in 2 years,
I know.
so
Yeah. Well, that's
that's
cool, man.
That's the good part. Yeah, thank God it was 60 degrees here today, 64. So we went and had lunch with somebody outdoors. But I miss that. I miss going and hanging and what it is, the hang. That's
Yeah. I went there a couple years ago, right before COVID. I think it was like the October of what was it? October of 2020. I think, or it was not, it was 2019. I went and stayed with Val, and we went out and I had a great time, man. Because he was coming out here a lot. And he kind of put the guilt trip on me. He's like, you owe me a trip, man. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I'll come out. And I came out for like 3-4 days. I had a blast.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah, it's
had great barbecue. Yeah, it's beautiful there. Sometimes it's tempting to move somewhere like that because like when you saying when you lived in New York, you had a place that was worth a lot. And I have a home here in California, and it's just exploded. So it's like tempting to think like, man, I can kind of move anywhere I want right now.
Yeah.
You
Well, that's
know?
what Troy from Guitar Wank, that's what he
Yeah,
did. I think they sold their place in LA, and I think they moved or they're rent. No, I think they found they could rent that out for so much money that they're renting because they had a place in Nashville that they were renting out, and so they rent that place out, and now they're living in Nashville.
probably for
So
free.
yeah, close. Yeah, we got together. I got together with him and Val. One day we had lunch, which was
Yeah, I'm supposed to meet up with Troy too. Val put me into Val's such a nice guy. I got my new record and he's like, getting on my ass. You gotta talk to these guys. They'll help you, blah, blah. And I'm like the worst businessman. I put my stuff out there and I hit people up, but it just sometimes it's just not easy. So I just try and make the best music I can. I put it out there and just hope and pray people like it.
yeah. I mean, my advice to everyone is just YouTube. You know,
Yeah.
put it up on YouTube.
That's what
Yep.
I do. I put up on YouTube and I do this. And I did a listening party the last weekend, and it was kind of a disaster. The sound didn't work for a little bit. So I had to kill that one and start a new one. I think whatever people were trying to see that one didn't get the second one. So
YouTube listening party.
yeah, that's just me being a boomer, not knowing what the hell I'm doing with technology. I
Yeah.
had the mics, everything was set up properly. And then when I started, I'm getting, messages saying, hey, dude, I can't hear you. So I was like, Jesus. So I had to do a new one.
It's another damn learning curve.
It
It's
sure
like
is, man.
we've been through plenty of them, but
I
there's just
know.
they just keep coming.
I know. I know. Well,
Well,
hey,
man,
man, I don't want to take up your whole night. I really appreciate you, meeting me for this. Can you tell us? So the website is Guitar Moderne, or is that it?
guitarmoderne.com. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any like projects that you want to promote, any recordings or anything like that you have out there?
Not, I don't have any, I haven't put out anything of my own. I mean, oddly, I've been working on other people's projects, over COVID. I mean, I kind of migrated into photography during COVID.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
I haven't been playing, and obviously I've been playing out, but all of a sudden people started calling me to put tracks on their records. So I have a friend in England, Nick Cody. You can find him all over the interwebs. It's just Nick Cody, um, and he's putting out. He's an amazing guy. He does neural linguistic programming as his main gig. But at 50, he decided he wanted to be a musician, and play
Wow.
music. So he started off putting together a ukulele band. He started playing ukulele. He played guitar for years, but he took up ukulele, put together a band, not all ukuleles, just ukulele, bass drums, and I think a violin. And he was playing festivals. He started writing songs. He turned into a really good songwriter, and singer. And then he's been doing a guitar record. So I've put guitar on 3 or 4 tracks of
Okay.
his stuff. And musically, as a matter of fact, I got that blues guitar player James Armstrong. I've produced a couple of his records, and I've written a bunch of songs with him. So we're starting to write for the next record, and he just sent me a track that I got to listen to and check out. But we'll see when that comes out. But yeah, I've written songs on the last 3 or 4, and produced some of the last couple of his records. And that's mostly what I've been doing musically. But now
That's
mostly these
cool.
days, I'm trying to put more time into Guitar Moderne because it has started taking up to another level with the YouTube videos. I I have a Joe Gore video I got to post. He was an editor, a guitar player, and played with PJ
Right.
Harvey and Tom Waits and Tracy Chapman also.
Wow.
So we did it, yeah, and I've known him for 30 years. I kind of got my gig at Guitar Player because he was going on the road with PJ Harvey and they needed somebody to take up some of the writing slack, so he recommended me, and that was how I got started there, and we've known each other for years. So that was a fun talk. He just put out a record of 14th century music that he plays on guitar, and but I don't even know how to describe. He plays it on electric guitar, not on acoustic guitar, and adds, programs some drum parts, and did a great job. It's amazing, amazing sounding record, amazing music. Because he studied,
Wow.
he was that was his thing for years, was studying early music, which apparently was not specifically written for specific instruments. They just write the music, and then whoever was around would play it. Whatever instruments you had around would play it. So he just
Yeah.
put his own interpretation on it. So that was a fun interview. That'll be up soon.
Well, I
And
really like your interviews. You're good at it.
oh, thank you. What's the name of your record?
My new record's called Empty Streets. It's
Okay.
a quartet with Josh Nelson, this great bass player from New York, Carl McComas Reichel, and Dan Schnell. They're all LA guys now. And it's definitely more of a straight ahead, but it's all original compositions. I need to do something with standards. I've never done a standards record.
Oh,
you
well,
know.
you play them beautifully. I mean, from what
Oh,
I've heard
thanks, man.
on YouTube, I'm gonna be studying your angel eyes, because at least I know the changes, so I can figure out what you're doing. Do you teach online also?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I have like a little channel where I do like little lessons and stuff, and I'm trying to get students out of that. But yeah, I do that online. It actually works pretty well. I was surprised that, we were forced to do it during the pandemic, and I don't like doing classes like that. But one-on-one works pretty well. So I got a guy in Switzerland right now, and he's awesome. And I got a family in North Carolina, and I had a guy in Phoenix. So it works kind of well. It's pretty
Cool.
cool.
Great.
Yeah, man.
Well, yeah, I'm glad Val hooked us up. And it's been great talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you come out to NAM, please look me up. We'll have a drink or something.
Sounds good. Also, if you want to send me, if you want to transfer me the files, the video files and the audio files, I'll put it up on Guitar Moderne.
Oh, wow, that would be great.
That's
I'll
okay
have
with
to.
you. Yeah.
We'll talk later. I'm not sure how to do that, but I will, if we can talk and you could tell me how to go about doing it or something, I would be
Yeah.
happy to do that. That'd be great.
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, I don't know how you work it. When you shut off the record, you can edit this ending part out, but when you shut off the recording, it just goes into someplace on your computer. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and there's the folder there, and I mean, you could just probably send me that whole folder. I'm not sure if there's a limit on WeTransfer, but it's free, and you just upload. They just ask for your email address, because they send you a confirmation to make sure it's your email address it's coming from.
Oh, okay. So you're saying just the video? Because what I do, like I literally just drag it on my desktop and then just upload it to YouTube. That's all I do. But I know you can extract the audio files. I don't know
Well,
how
you don't
to
have
do
to do
that.
it. I mean, it's all in one folder. It's
Okay.
all just in one folder with today's date on it. So
Okay.
you can just take that whole folder. I mean, if it's too big, because the nice thing about Zoom is they give you separate audio files for you and me. We each have our own audio file, and then they give you a video with both together.
Okay.
So, I mean, because it's nice to have the separate audio files, because sometimes if somebody's audio is too soft, you can edit it. But you can either just send the whole folder and for the day, and which will have everything in it, and I can deal with that. And if for any reason that's too big, you can find just, I think, the M4 video with the audio, and just send that.
Okay. Well, we'll keep in touch, and I'll definitely get that to you. I would love that. But for those of you listening, definitely check out Michael's website, Guitar Moderne. It was a Moderne, correct? And
Yes.
then there's a YouTube channel, and he's interviewed like some of the top players, guy we were talking about, Blake Mills and Bill Frisell and John McLaughlin and Andy Summers I listened to today. So they're all really good interviews, and Michael really knows his stuff. So you guys should definitely check it out. It's pretty awesome.
Well, thanks, Dwayne. And yeah, I love the Trio Eclectic record, and I'll look forward. Are you going to be putting the other one up on either Bandcamp or
It's
Spotify?
everywhere. It's everywhere. It's on YouTube, Spotify, everywhere. So you
Cool.
would look under Dwayne Allen Quartet.
Okay.
Although there's a Dwayne Allen of the Oak Ridge Boys. So when
Yeah.
people put that in, they
Saw
find
that
him.
when I was looking for you on YouTube. I'm going, that's
Yeah.
hot.
Yeah, that's
Cool.
not, he has a lot more hair than I do. So
Well, I'll look for
anyway,
it.
okay, buddy. Thank you so much, man. It was great meeting you, and we'll keep in touch, man. Have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Thanks, buddy.
Bye bye.